Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, 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 welcome. We are having a session with Mr. Remy Castillo. Mr. Remy Castillo is a serial entrepreneur. He's driven by the success of others. He's born and raised in South Texas, and he loves helping businesses and individuals grow and maximize their true potential. Most of his career has been spent in sales and marketing. Remy was recruited to take over a sales division of a precious metals company, and within 5 years, helped to grow that business from 33 million in sales to over 150 million annually. Mr. Steve took his passion for traveling and created a members travel in 2018, where he helps others to travel to places that he's always dreamed of. He had launched a startup beverage company called Moonshine Sweetie in 2013, and this has become a national brand now, found in over 18,000 stores in all states of the USA. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Mr. Remy Castillo to share with us a very relevant topic at this time, pivoting. Mr. Castillo, welcome.
Thank you, Prudencia, and thank you to everybody who's joined us. Again, apologies for day one. We wanted to get this started and kicked off on when I was asked to speak at this event last year, when we were doing this in person. This was, right at the time where I had a topic in mind that I wanted to discuss at that moment in that time. But I felt as the event had been pushed and postponed due to COVID and all of the things that were going on at the time, I felt that this was a more appropriate topic, was to change topics and to talk about something that I think we're all experiencing right now, which is having to pivot. And myself as an entrepreneur, had to do a lot of pivoting this year. I launched a travel company in 2018, and in the midst of getting everything ready with all of the tech and everything that we had to do, programming, we as a company had to pivot. COVID literally shut us down. We were pretty much handcuffed for a year, and there was, uncertainty as to when travel was going to come back, if it was going to come back, if it was going to come back in the way that it had been. And thank God that we're starting to see people traveling again. We're starting to see the world open up. It bits in pieces, and it's understandable that, we're not probably going to get back to 100% capacity and functionality in every economy because of what we're dealing with. But with that being said, I think we can all learn some lessons from what's happened. And one of those lessons is being able to be nimble and be able to adjust. And so the topic today, pivoting, is an appropriate topic because we've had to adjust and pivot not only our personal lives, but our businesses. And so I'd like to talk today about the topic pivoting. It's a general topic, but I think it applies to many, many things in all facets. And so as we get into this presentation, I've taken the opportunity to highlight a few companies that I want to talk about today that have done a great job of not only pivoting, but they've done a great job of being able to offer services to customers like ourselves. And they've done it in a way where many of us day to day use a lot of these services and don't even realize that these companies made major shifts in pivoting. But then I want to talk a little bit more about how we as individuals and companies can take these lessons and begin to adjust and pivot ourselves and really begin to apply some of the practices that some of these Fortune 500 companies and large organizations have been able to put into practice. And so with that, I want to say thank you for attending. Thank you for being here. And I hope that everybody is healthy and well. And I hope that 2021 and 2022 coming up soon Turns out to be a prosperous and wonderful year for everybody, especially for this organization who's been so gracious to ask me to speak. Thank you very much. So with that being said, let's get into this topic and let's get going. So when we talk about the term pivoting, we look at pivoting. There's a fine line between winning and losing. And one of the things that I think we've seen across, particularly here in the country and the world, is many businesses have had to close their doors. Primarily in the restaurant industry, where small mom and pop businesses were not allowed to keep their doors open because of COVID. A lot of these businesses overnight had to shut the doors, unfortunately, because customers could no longer sit down and have a meal at an establishment. And when we talk about pivoting, you look at the topic pivoting, there's a lot of things that pivot or that companies have to pivot to. And restaurant industry is one of the major ones that had to do a lot of pivoting. There's a lot of companies and restaurants out there that begin to offer delivery services and begin to offer different things. But pivoting itself can apply to our own personal lives. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the presentation itself today, because I think that there's a pivot and there's an adjustment within ourselves that we have to make to understand that there is options for all of us in every organization, in every business. There is going to be pandemics and epidemics. There's going to be circumstances that are going to be thrown in front of us, speed bumps, hurdles. And I think we as individuals have to begin to be able to adjust and pivot the way that we think, the way that we act, the way that we view our businesses, the way that we view how, I think we always, a lot of times we're ready to throw in the towel when something gets thrown our way, and we don't really look at the big picture. If anything, COVID has taught us to appreciate time more. And so when we talk today about this fine line between winning and losing, I use this example to start off with, because this is something that we all use. Instagram. This is a company that was, and this is a quote from the founder of Instagram. Instagram was created because there was no single place dedicated to giving your mobile photos a place to live and to be seen. And this is an interesting topic here, because we all use Instagram or Facebook to share photos and to let family and friends see how we're doing. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is Instagram was started out as a company called Bourbon. It was a check-in app that included gaming elements. And the creators worried that Bourbon had too much clutter, so they stripped everything away and they created just photos. And within 24 hours of launching, they had 25,000 downloads. And within 1 year, they had 7 million. And today it's the most widely used app on iPhone for photos. And when we talk about a pivot, you think about companies like Instagram, or this next company that I'm going to talk about, which we all know, we all use, YouTube. These are companies that I think have set an example. These are companies that started out in small rooms and garages and in small offices in Silicon Valley, and these are household names today, multi-billion-dollar corporations that started out with a simple idea, but they pivoted and they adjusted, they changed the direction in which they were heading. And I think there's lessons to be learned from some of these major corporations, because as individuals, when we talk about throwing in the towel or giving up, we have options. There is the ability to shift and pivot. Here's a prime example, YouTube. A lot of people don't realize this, but YouTube originally started out as a dating app. It started out as an app called a hookup, which ultimately failed. And the YouTube creators, after realizing that there was a need for a platform to upload content, they created a sharing platform called YouTube. And today, it is now the second most popular website in the world behind Google. And of course, this next one, I think, is one that's very popular in many households around the world, Netflix. Here's a great quote from the founder: "Don't be afraid to change the model." And there's a lesson to be learned here. Don't be afraid to change the model. How often have we had an idea, a concept, a direction we're heading. And too many times, as business owners, entrepreneurs, as managers, general managers, CEOs of companies, we're afraid to change the model. And I think that we have to get out of that mindset that we can't change the model. We can change the model. We have to be open to the idea that there may be a better way of doing something, that our thought process may not be right at the time, that we may need to gain insight and counsel from other individuals, and be open to the idea that we can adjust and pivot. And it doesn't mean it has to close the doors. Doesn't mean that we have to stop doing business. It just means that we have to change something. And so, Netflix started out as a DVD rental service. And I've talked about this in other presentations because I love the concept and I love what Netflix has done. They've been able to adjust and pivot multiple times. When this company first started, they started it in an era where Blockbuster was a prevalent and predominant company. At the time, Blockbuster had thousands of stores nationwide, and everybody would go and rent their DVDs and bring them in. And Netflix started offering the ability to receive a DVD at home. Well, that changed in 2007, and they started streaming. They gave Blockbuster the opportunity to buy Netflix at the time for $50 million. They were laughed out of the room. And, I go back to this because the CEO and the board of that company at the time, Blockbuster, had the opportunity at that moment. They were presented with a thought, an idea, to be able to pivot and say, hey, maybe DVD is not the way of the future. Maybe we need to adjust what we're doing here and maybe buy this company for $50 million. Because if they bought Netflix for $50 million when they had the opportunity, Blockbuster would be Netflix today. But they didn't. So in 2013, Netflix pivoted again. Not only did they start streaming in 2007, but in 2013, they started creating their own content. They started producing their own movies, their own shows. And today, it now generates over $25 billion. And unfortunately, Blockbuster is out of business. So there's lessons to be learned from these major corporations, which is why I wanted to use them for the presentation today, because each one of these companies pivoted and changed the business models. The companies that we talk about today in the presentation are just a few examples. And I'll share another one with you here shortly. I had an opportunity of meeting a gentleman, which I'll talk about in the presentation here in a little bit. But we talk about these examples because here's another great example. And this is a gentleman I'm referring to. This is the company called Rotella Italian Bread. And I live in Scottsdale, Arizona currently. And I happened to be walking my dog one morning. And I was strolling along outside, walking the dog at the dog park. And I came across this gentleman. And I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but he's the gentleman standing next to the lady to the far right there. And his name is John Rotella. And at the time, casually meeting this gentleman, he was wearing a t-shirt and it had a logo and a nice design. And being in the CPG business, I was intrigued by the logo, and I was really drawn to the way his logo was designed. And I made a comment. I said, I really like the logo of your shirt. And he says, well, thank you. He says, it's a dog treat company that I started a couple of years ago. And I said, interesting. I said, so dog treats? He says, yes. I said, wonderful. I was in the beverage business. And so we got to talking, and I asked him where his dog treats were sold. And he says, oh, they're sold at Petco and PetSmart. And we're just getting into a few stores, and we're only in about 600 stores. And I said, well, interesting. I said, well, I have some contacts within the distribution networks. I said, I'm happy to share them with you. And he says, well, we're in the distribution network as well. And I said, really? He goes, yeah, well, we have a bread company. It's a small little bread company. And he was being very modest. And I said, well, tell me a little bit more about the bread company. And he began to share his story with me. And come to find out, this man is one of the heirs and one of the family sons of the Rotella Italian Bread Company. And to give you a little insight, this family has been producing bread for over 100 years. The great-great-great-grandfather immigrated from Italy, moved to Nebraska, started a small business, small bakery at the time, started delivering bread to people's homes. And history over time, over the history of this family's bread company, they have turned into be one of the largest bread companies in the world, producing bread for the likes of companies like Arby's and Popeye's Chicken. And this gentleman was very modest and very, very nice gentleman, and began to share his story with me. But the reason we got into the topic was it started out talking about a logo, but what I caught that really caught my attention that I thought was very interesting was how he as an individual entrepreneur pivoted. So you can imagine they're producing bread for Popeyes and Arby's and all these major corporations, Walmart, Target. They produce millions and millions and millions of pounds of bread each year, but they throw away 18 million pounds of bread every single year. 18 million pounds of bread. And they were doing this for years. They were throwing bread away because it was leftover scraps of bread that the edges and pieces of bread that were not being able to be used for commercial use. And so he came up with the idea, what can we do with this bread, and how can we take this bread and turn it into a product that is usable? So he came up with a dog treat. So they grind 18 million pounds of bread. They add probiotics. They add all of these other ingredients, healthy for you dog treats that are now being sold as a viable item and a product that they can provide to the market for dog lovers and pet owners who want to give their furry friends a healthy choice for a treat. And it was such an interesting conversation that I had with him. And since then, we've been able to have several conversations, and I've been able to pick his brain. And it's just interesting how the idea of, throwing bread away turned into the concept of creating a healthy treat. And so when we talk about pivoting, there's so many opportunities for us to pivot, but sometimes we're blinded by what's in front of us. And when I say what's in front of us, ourselves, we can't get out of our own way. And so I share these stories with you because they're inspiring to me. And as an entrepreneur, when I, as an individual, am thinking about how can I pivot, how can I change, how can I adjust, it's what keeps me up at night. We always have to be innovating. We always have to be changing. But I want to share a not so successful story. And I want to share a story of a company who didn't pivot. And this is a company that I actually had the opportunity to sit in on a forum in California one year in Santa Monica at a beverage conference. And at the time when I sat in at this conference, I was listening to the CEO of this company. And I thought, wow, what an interesting concept. I said, he was talking about how they were going to change the juice world, the beverage world, how they were going to be able to provide consumers with cold pressed juice that they could produce in their home through a machine that was very similar to like a Keurig, which is the picture you see here in the screen today. And when I was listening at this conference and taking notes and listening to this gentleman speak about the company, what really caught my attention was that they had raised $118 million to start this venture. And they raised some money from some big companies, Google Ventures, Kleiner Partners, Perkins. And $118 million is a lot of money to raise for a startup, but they got it. They had the money. Unfortunately, there were some things they didn't think about, and there were some things that they didn't do that they had an opportunity to do early on as a company to adjust and pivot, and they failed to do it. Well, within 18 months of raising $118 million, this company was out of business and had to close the doors. And there's a lesson learned here that no matter what great team you have behind you, no matter how much money you have in the bank, no matter what you have at your disposal, unless you're willing to pivot and make adjustments, it could be the demise of what you're trying to do. And so when we talk about the concept of pivoting, you are greater than you think, but only if you're willing to pivot. You know, pivoting really means thinking outside the way that we view things. You know, our mindset, I talked a little bit about this to begin with. Our mindset as individuals, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as managers and CEOs and people who are running these organizations, we have to begin to pivot the way that we change. Because if we don't, well, we could end up like Juicero. And, you know, the belief that small changes can't improve things or help is why so many businesses struggle today. Small-minded thinking is a major problem in many organizations. I'm currently consulting with a company right now that is in the precious metals business. It's the former company that I used to work for. They approached me last year about opening up a new division for them in Scottsdale, and they wanted to hire, train, open up a division that focused on a different sector of what they were currently doing. And what I found intriguing was that this company does $250 million a year. Very successful company. They've been in business for 20 years. They now are at the point where they're busting at the seams. They're growing by leaps and bounds. But this new division of this company that they wanted to start is going to be the future of where they're going. And what I thought was interesting was the CEO, when she approached me and said, hey, I want you to come consult with us. I want you to help us get this off the ground. At the time, when she approached me with the idea and the concept of what they were doing, I said, you know, it's great. And I think what you're doing is fantastic. But I, as an individual, as an entrepreneur, very honestly, was small-minded thinking at the time. And she came to me and approached me with these goals and said, I want to be doing this much money by 6 months into it. I want to be doing this much by 1 year. I believe that we can do this. We have all the tools in place. We need to go out and do this. I was a little reluctant at the time to buy into the goals that she had given the company and the organization. And my small-minded thinking at the time was awakened by the reality that 6 months into it, this company is now doing close to $10 million a month in sales with a new division, with new people, with something that is completely foreign to what they've been doing. It was a complete shift in their whole business model. But the CEO of this company was wise enough and smart enough to understand that they had to pivot in order for their business to be able to grow, because they had plateaued. They were successful. They were doing 150, 200, 250, and they kind of hit this benchmark of $250 million a year. And she said, the thing that's going to take us from 250 million to $1 billion is going to be this shift in the business and how we adjust. Well, I'm bought in now because I can see for myself what the reality is and what the possibilities are. And so I think we as individuals have to take a step back and say to ourselves, how do we pivot? How do we adjust? What do we need to do? Sometimes it means we have to hire a consultant. We have to bring people in. It means that we have to train. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But there's 3 key reasons that I believe are reasons to pivot in today's environment. 1, you know, we're talking about this credit union organization. What a wonderful organization you have. And I was listening in on the stage a while ago and listening to some of the statistics and was really blown away and listening to some of the other speakers. But one of the things that we have to be doing as individuals, as business owners, is listening to our customers, and as a credit union, as an organization, is listening to your members. How important is the member? I think members are so important. We always need to be listening to our customers. We need to be listening to our members. We need to figure ways to create less friction and provide services to our clients and to our members and make things easy. I think that's an important thing. I think when we see sales drop or services, a need for the services drop, that's a reason to pivot. You know, as I was mentioning, the CEO of this precious metals company, she saw the company start to plateau. She realized that they needed to pivot in order to get to the next step, in order to reach the next benchmark. And then, of course, last but not least, I think is one of the most vital assets of any organization is the employee base, our employees. If we're not listening to the individuals who are on the front line, the people who are the front face, who are the face of the company, if we're not understanding the heartbeat of what's going on, we're failing. Not only are we failing our employees, we're failing the organization, we're failing our customers. The employees are one of the most important assets of any company. And I think we constantly need to be getting a pulse from them, getting feedback from them. We need to be sitting in and having meetings and hearing from the people that are checking in customers at the front desk, people that are talking to members as they walk into the credit unions, people that are sitting down with the customers offering services and getting feedback from them and understanding what is it that would make your job easier and what can we do as an organization to provide those services to make life easier for you, the customer, which ultimately results in creating more revenue, more sales for these organizations, for our companies, the employees. So when we think about it, it's a three-step approach, but these are three things that I think are vital and three key reasons to pivot in today's business environment. If any one of these levers is off by any means, we need to pivot, and we need not be stubborn, because oftentimes we get stubborn. But I think these are some of the credit union challenges in my research today and in the last few days that I've been doing this, putting this presentation together for you. But I think these are some of the reasons that people need to really kind of pay attention to in terms of challenges, right? Marketing efforts. I was listening to Moses talk a while ago and, talk about digitization, and it's so true, marketing efforts. How do we get out in front of more customers? Cybersecurity has been a big topic. My goodness. What an unfortunate several events that we've had here in the States, particularly in the last couple of months. The Colonial Pipeline being hacked, having this organization having to pay a $5 million ransom to be able to get the pipeline up and running. It was literally shutting down gas, in the eastern seaboard of the country, where the majority, 1/3 of the population lives here in the United States. Gas prices soared, but cybersecurity is going to be a major thing that I think credit unions need to be paying closely attention to. Hiring and training, which goes back to the employees, right? Making sure that we're constantly providing new training to individuals that are on the front line. We have to be constantly hiring, constantly training, bringing in new people, moving people up within the organization, being able to share thoughts and ideas, not keep everything to ourselves. And of course, technology is one of the things that I think is talked about every year within each organization. The evolution of technology. I was talking to somebody the other day about this. There's now artificial intelligence that will help you write blogs and stories and put together social media posts and create all kinds of marketing efforts for your organization. There's so many different technologies that are available for us today that I think we need to be open to the idea that some of these technologies can help our organizations. So when we talk about challenges, we need to be looking at this, from a 30,000 view, but then really get into the details with it, because it's so important to pay attention to all these little levers. And of course, you don't want to wait until it's too late. I think too many times people have been at the brink of closing an organization or having to shut down a division or having to lay off people, but it's because they waited until the last minute. They let pride, they let ego, they let bad managers stay in place that shouldn't have been in place, fear of failure. They got way too complacent, way too comfortable. I go back to Blockbuster. Blockbuster at one point had 10,000 stores. They were sitting fat, thinking there's no way we're going to ever go out of business. We're making too much money. But technology changed the game. And because they weren't able to pivot and adjust and change the way that they thought about how video streaming and DVD watching or how entertainment was going to be delivered into people's households, they failed, and they waited until it was too late. So a lot of companies, I think right now, are on the brink of making decisions that are either going to make or break them. And I tell companies that I consult with, don't let pride be the thing that closes your doors. Don't let ego be the thing that causes you to go out of business. A lot of times CEOs and CMOs and COOs of companies and general managers of companies are so caught up with their philosophy, their way of doing things, that they don't adjust and they don't pivot. And come to find out, then they end up having to lay off 1,000 people, when small adjustments and small pivots could have been made that could have avoided the demise. So I say this, instead we want to act and adjust. We want to put policies in place to identify challenges before they become problems. It's amazing how if we begin to listen to our employees, if we begin to listen to our customers, they will give us the answers that we need. And if we're willing to adjust as things are happening and not wait till the aha moment, a lot of this can be avoided. But we've got to constantly train. We've got to get creative. There's risk in everything. There's risk in life, right? There's risk in walking out the door today. But risks are okay if they're measured and they're controlled. And then you have to ask yourself, how can we innovate? What can we do different? What is a differentiating factor that we're able to offer as an organization, as a company, that our competitors are not doing? We can be the ones that lead by innovation. And of course, always be willing to help. It always comes down to that. Always be willing to help. Always be willing to help the fellow employees, the companies, executives. Everybody can teach somebody something. And I think we need to be willing to help. We need to be willing to adjust. I truly hope that this conference has been helpful for all of you. I saw some of the topics, and there were so many great speakers and so many great topics being discussed. And it's amazing. I think what this organization has been able to do is been able to put together a conference for 60 plus years and be able to bring in so much great talent and great people every single year to be able to provide insight and knowledge and education and service. And I commend you, because I think that's what it takes. And that's why you've been around for 63 years. That's why you guys have been able to constantly raise the bar. And I think that when we talk about the future of where you're going as an organization or as individuals, we have to be looking ahead. We have to be looking ahead. The younger generation, the children, how do we market to our customers today to be able to increase our member base? Because these kids that are adolescents, I have a 13-year-old son, I'm trying to teach him about finances right now and how to save and he has a bank account and, how to put money away each month and where to invest that money, and teaching him that, hey, by creating a Roth right now for him and beginning to put money into that Roth every single year for him, and teaching him that, that's going to compound over time, and that by the time he's my age and by the time he gets to a point where he's his grandparents' age and he retires, he's going to have a nice nest egg. But that's part of training. That's part of teaching. These are some of the things that are not taught in school today. Nobody ever sat down and taught me, hey, let me teach you about finances. Let me teach you about, but again, the educational system, unfortunately, has not pivoted in the way that we teach certain things. We teach the, certain curriculum of basic math and English and science, but we're not teaching about finances in school right now. We're not teaching about how to open up a business, how to start a business. We should be teaching kids how to open up a lemonade stand and how to manage that lemonade stand. If we begin to pivot the way that we begin to start to manage from an adolescent age, by the time kids become adults, those small minor adjustments that I'm talking about in the presentation will lead to major changes in the way it affects the economy, because we're going to have smarter kids coming into the world. We're going to have people that understand business and concept and understand that it's about learning some of the things right now. And so, these are topics that get me excited because, I've been traveling this last year and building this business and getting this business off the ground. And it's been a struggle because for me, there was something that was outside of my control. I couldn't control COVID. I couldn't tell my suppliers, open up your hotels, open up your cruise lines, These are things that were outside of my control. But what I could control was creating processes and putting things in place so that when the world did open, I was ready. Creating automation, creating seamless single sign-on for our members so that when somebody becomes a member with us, they're able to sign up and be able to instantly have access to their platform, have emails that are generated for them that go right into their email box, have onboarding videos, have things ready. So while the world was sitting still, it didn't mean that I had to. It meant that there was things that I could still be working on and doing in preparation so that I didn't have to wait until the last minute, that I didn't have to shut my doors down. Did it cost me money? Absolutely. But we have to invest sometimes. And sometimes those investments come in the form of pivots because there's organizations that are not willing to invest. And those investments that we're making into ourselves and into our business are what help us get outside of that comfort zone, because way too many times as organizations, as individuals, we get comfortable with what we know, but we're not willing to get outside the comfort zone and pivot. And so I commend everybody, that is here today for, being willing to be open to the idea that we can pivot. And I commend you for hanging in there this year, because it has been a tough year for so many people. It's been a tough year, but there's one thing that we can understand and we can all get on board with, is that if we're willing to pivot the way that we think, the way that we approach our business, the way that we approach our employees, the way that we handle our day-to-day activities, those adjustments will be the things that lead us into the future, into 2022, and they will be the things that set us up for success. And so I wish every single one of you success. I hope that you find ways to pivot within yourselves. And that may be daily activities. That may be getting up and going for a walk in the morning. It may be meditation. It may be writing down. It may be being acts of kindness, gratitude. There's so many ways that we can pivot that adjust every other facet of our life. I was recently given, I have it right here next to me, a gratitude book. There's so many things I'm grateful for in my life, but I think there's something to be said when you write them down on a daily basis and you really practice that gratitude and you realize that life is way too short. The one thing we all have in common to a certain extent is time. And what are we willing to do with the time, and how are we willing to pivot the way that we view that time? Because we can make excuses and say, well, I don't have time to go get in shape. I don't have time to go do this. I don't have time to go do that. Not true. Pivot. It may mean turning off the Netflix for a couple of hours and pivoting what we're doing with our time. It may mean that we're going to invest in additional training. We're going to go hire a consultant. We're going to hire a coach. We're going to do things that maybe get us outside of our comfort zone. Maybe we're going to view and approach something with a little bit different mindset that, maybe I'm not always right. Maybe I need to go hire somebody that knows a little bit more about me, about this situation, this topic, and pivot the way that I view it. So I'm just grateful. I'm thankful. I thank you. I thought this was an appropriate picture. This is a little kid grabbing a handful of sand and saying, let's go get it, because that's what we have the opportunity to do this year, is to go get it. And so I want to thank each and every one of you. And I hope that you will pivot the way that you view each and every day, that you wake up with gratitude, that you wake up with a sense of accomplishment, that you're going to attack the world, that you're going to do it in a positive way, and that you're going to leave a mark on this earth, and that you're going to go into the office, whether you're the the guy that's at the front greeting people, or whether you're the CEO of that organization, that you're going to pivot the way that you adjust your thinking every single day, and be open to the idea that as a team, as an organization, as a culture, we can create a better world for our kids, for our members, and for each and individual person we meet on a day-to-day basis. We can leave an impact on this world. And so I want to say thank you to everybody. And again, apologies for day one. We talk about pivoting. This organization has been so gracious. Thank you to Mike and Careflow team and Diane and everybody. Denise, you guys have been wonderful. They pivoted. They said, Remy, we'll adjust it. Don't worry. We're gonna move you to Thursday. And I'm jumping on a plane and changing things and moving things around. And we have to be open to the idea to pivot. And so God bless each and every one of you. I hope that the conference has been great for you. I hope that you've been able to get something out of it. And I love you all. And I'll take this time to leave it open for some questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Castillo. This has been exhilarating. It has been so wonderful to hear from you, and it is something that each and every one of us needs to do. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, remember to put your questions in the question and answer segment. I'm seeing one here. How to start when you have a grand vision, a potential market, but not enough startup capital?
You broke up. Would you please repeat the question? I apologize.
The question, how to start when you have a grand vision, a potential market, but not enough startup capital?
Not enough startup capital. So great question. So I think one of the ways to really kind of test the market when you don't have a whole lot of startup capital is to test the idea first, right? I think there's one way you can do that. You can go to friends and family. You can go to people that you trust, mentors. You can toss around the idea, really kind of see if there's an interest in what you're trying to do. And then you can raise money. There's all kinds of ways to raise money. Friends and family, there's small business loans, there's opportunities. Listen, I've heard of people putting, people that are willing to risk it and willing to go after it, put on their credit cards. Now, I'm not encouraging that. I'm not encouraging to go into debt, but there's always a way. And I think that oftentimes we put up roadblocks in our mind and we're fearful of change. We're fearful of venturing out to do something because we're afraid to fail. I mean, let's face it, nobody wants to fail. But I think through failure, there's a lot to be learned, and there's a lot of success stories that you'll see from successful entrepreneurs that have failed multiple times at multiple ventures. They didn't get it right the first time. But if you have a great idea and if you have a great concept and that there's a market for it, you don't have to have a ton of capital to get started. You just have to start. And it may not mean that you're going to have all of the bells and whistles that you want to offer as a product and a service to your customers, but start with one concept, start with one idea, and begin to see if there's interest there. And if there's interest there, I guarantee you, there's smart money out there that will invest with you. There's money out there. There's capital. It's available. You might have to go knock on 1,000 doors to find it, but it's out there. I mean, if you go back to the story of some of these most successful billionaire entrepreneurs and you read their bios and you read the stories, they were turned down 1,000 times by venture capitalists, by banks. Everybody told them no, it was a silly idea. You can't do it. Don't do it. That's crazy. You're going to lose and they kept pushing forward and they kept pushing forward and they kept pushing forward and they kept pushing forward. And bam, they finally broke through. So, you don't have to have a ton of money to get started. You just have to get started. And I think there's a lot of great ideas. And there's a lot of people out there that have great ideas and great concepts of things that they want to do, but they're fearful to just go do it. You just got to step out there and go do it. If there's something that you're able to offer, that you truly feel that you are convicted and you have passion about in your heart, that you feel is a service that is needed, Go do it. Don't let anybody tell you you can't. Don't let anybody tell you it's a silly idea. Don't listen to all the people, because small-minded thinking and small-minded people will tend to gravitate to other small-minded people. If your circle of individuals is not promoting and pushing you for greatness, or to push you to go out and venture out, then you have the wrong group of people around you. You have the wrong group of people surrounding you. So you don't have to have a ton of money to go do something. Just go do it.
For that, we have Yvel Doyle saying, wow, super awesome presentation, on point. We have Melanie Campbell saying, many credit unions have an aging membership. They will be forced to embrace technology in order to attract the next generation of members. Converting youth savers to full membership is a start, but technology will help to keep them in the movement. We have Cashman saying, thank you, excellent presentation. And I don't see any more questions, but I have some takeaways that I received. You said, we as a people, we must not be too ready to throw in the towel. We must learn to appreciate times more. You said, don't be afraid to change the model. And I like that, because people are relatively resistant to change. You spoke about the company that took the 18 million pounds of bread that was thrown away every year and was able to pivot and come up with something that is now selling, and making generous profits for them. And this is something that we call, turning trash to treasure, or in a biblical perspective, turning stones to bread. So I like that very much. And I like the fact that you said everyone can teach someone something. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. God bless each and every one of you. There's another question, I think, in the Q&A says, I think here.
That's a question. It says, how to start. No, our Caribbean islands are small and therefore have limited markets. Any advice for entering into larger markets?
Great question. When I went back, and if you go back to the presentation, you'll see that in the slides, I talked about you're greater and bigger than you think. We live in a global economy today. I think that was the comment that was the question that was asked, is asked in a sense, if we're limited to our markets, then that's true, right? But we live in a world today where at the click of a button, we, on a mobile device, can provide a service and or a business to somebody halfway across the world. And there's a lot of free services out there and technology out there that give us the ability to connect, right? You can go start a free Zoom account and you can do presentations over Zoom for 45 minutes for free. It doesn't cost you anything. And if you want to upgrade, it costs you $15 a month to upgrade for unlimited, time on a Zoom room. But if you're a coach, if you're a consultant, if you're somebody who's doing business with somebody over a computer, it's so easy to be able to do this right here and connect. We don't have to be face to face anymore to do business. So we're not limited to the markets that we're in. That was true 40 years ago, 50 years ago. But technology has given us the ability to connect with anybody halfway across the world at any time, at any moment. And there's things now put in place where we can automate our businesses so that even while we're sleeping, our businesses give us the ability to generate revenue and make money, provide services, create insight, and allow you to be able to create value. So it goes back to the thinking, right? The philosophy of how do we view what we're doing? And I would tell you this, view it on a global scale. And if you're not looking at it that way, then you're thinking small and you're playing small. Think about it on a bigger scale. You're not gonna grow leaps and bounds overnight. And if you do, great, congratulations. I commend you, right? But everything has to start with something. So view it as a global market, approach it as so, and realize that you're always open for business. You're always open for business. We live in a digital age. So you're not handcuffed anymore to the idea that we can only have to play in this little playground. No, we don't. We can do business all around the world at any given time, at any given moment.
I have a question from Roxanne Linton.
Yes.
I would love to share your experience in having your team practice the pivoting mindset. What have you seen work to get your team to consistently adopt these small changes that will result in personal growth?
Well, I think it's a lot to do with personal development. Anytime I consult with a company, what I always like to do first and foremost, because I think business school today has taught, executives that the only way they can become profitable is by cutting employees. They look at the bottom line and they look at the P&L and they say, oh, well, if we get rid of these 50 employees, we're going to immediately, bring this much revenue to the company. And I think that's the wrong mindset. I think the greatest companies out there, the ones that really truly care, are the ones that invest in the employee base, because those employees are going to be able to really, really kind of be the foundation and what really helps an organization grow. So what I really look at first and foremost when I consult with any company or an organization is, what is the culture and what is the mindset of the organization? What is the heartbeat? What's the pulse? Do people feel good about coming to work? Do they come into the organization every single day on fire and ready to go? Because if they're not, there's a trickle-down effect that happens, and it works both up and down the ladder. So if the organization doesn't feel good from inside, that's where I look first. I look first at is, how do people feel? Do they feel valued? Do they feel good about their job? Do they feel good about coming into work every single day? Do they come in with a smile? Are they ready to take the day on? How are they approaching the member that walks in the door? Because as soon as the member walks in, if they're frowning, it's a trickle down effect. That customer leaves that organization and goes to the next credit union, goes to somewhere else and says, I don't want to do business here anymore. I was greeted improperly. I was treated unfairly. They didn't take the simple gesture of saying thank you and welcome and how are you doing? Is somebody opening the door for them? The little things that we often overlook, the minor details, are where I begin to, as when I consult with somebody or any organization, I look there, because all of the other things will take care of themselves if we understand what is the culture, what is the mindset. And if we can make those pivots right there with either middle management or the executive management to understand, look, you're looking at this completely wrong. You need to look at it from a ground level up, and everything else begins to take care of itself, because it goes both ways. It goes both ways. So culture is a big thing. And I'm sure somebody talked about culture as one of the topics of the presentations in the course of the last 4 days. And I'm almost positive somebody covered the topic of culture. But if you have a toxic environment, it is the demise of many companies. And the only time that I'm in favor of firing anybody or getting rid of anybody, and I've done it as a consultant for companies where they've given me lateral, the ability to come in and say, hey, we got to clean the organization up, is when somebody is so cantankerous, so negative, so detrimental to the business that one individual or group of individuals is hurting the organization, they got to go. But if everybody's willing to get on board and be a team and figure out how it's no longer I and how it's we, how we can help each other, I think all those other things take care of themselves. They truly do. You got to take care of the people, and they will take care of you.
I have one last question before we go into the reboot session.
Yes, ma'am.
It's from Almando Cox. He says, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp companies are not in the Caribbean, but we are using their services. What prevents Caribbean businesses to serve other markets?
What prevents
Caribbean business from serving other markets?
What prevents them?
Yes.
I don't know that.
We are not limited by our geographical location in respect to the global economy. Nothing is in our way. But however, while we are able to use these services in the Caribbean, our services are not being able to be presented in other markets.
And why is that they're not able to?
Could you explain? I see he said you must digitize your process, your model, your employees to be able to serve and scale your organization. But I'm not sure why he says that we're not able to serve.
Well, I'm sure you're limited in some capacity to some services and goods, right? If it's something that you're exporting that has to go through export, import-export business, and there's certain things, or VAT taxes and things that will limit you. I mean, there's certain limitations within certain organizations. But if, let's just say you have a digital asset, once you own the asset and you've created the asset, the product, the course, whatever it may be, that asset lives there. It's no longer an inventory. It's not like when I was in the beverage business and we had to provide products to Target or to Walmart, right? We didn't have to go produce hundreds of thousands of cases of product that are going to go to the shelves. If I have a digital asset, that's a digital asset that lives in a drive or lives in the cloud somewhere that I can immediately create an automation for, and it goes out. How many of you out there, I mean, I had the pleasure while I was in Grenada of eating some wonderful food. I mean, it was amazing. People were so gracious. I remember taking a tour with Dr. Terry, and we were driving in a van, and we stopped in a neighborhood, and the people were so wonderful. They literally stuck a plate of food in the car and said, "Here you go," and gave me a plate with a fork. And I'd never met these wonderful people in my life, and they're offering me food from their home. And it was amazing. It was a jackfruit with a curry sauce, and it was rice, and it was the perfect timing. I was so hungry, and I was like, God, thank you for providing this. But how many of you are able to literally sit in front of a camera? And I tried to use this camera today, but it wouldn't work. So that's why we had technical difficulties, and I apologize, but we pivoted, right? We're able to get it. Thank you, Mike. But how many of you can get in front of this right here, create a cookbook, create a recipe of all the wonderful recipes that you have in the Caribbean, put together a course, go to Thinkific, which you can do, or create it with one of these free platforms, come up with a step-by-step process on how to produce 10 different items, and now you have a cookbook or an e-cookbook that you can sell for $9.99 or $10.99. That easy, that quick. There's no excuse. There's no reason why you can't. It's available to you. Or how to do something, or how to create art, or Caribbean art, or, I mean, you're putting me on the spot right now, but if you gave me 30 minutes, I could probably have 40 different products that we could sell.
Mr. Cox is saying that there is nothing stopping us. It was a
yes. I agree, Mr. Cox. There is nothing stopping anybody.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for listening. And Mr. Castillo, it was indeed a riveting, very insightful, very informative presentation. One gentleman, Norman Williams, says, "Thank you, Remy. Great practical information that can have lasting benefits."
God bless you.
Yes. Adrian says, "I guess there's nothing but mindset."
That's
nothing but mindset. I remember you said that it doesn't matter the team, it doesn't matter the money. The mindset is of key importance. So we are going to leave with that. Mindset is key. Mindset is everything. Once again, Mr. Castillo, I want to thank you for your presentation, and we indeed had a wonderful time.
God bless you guys. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Have a blessed day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.